Welcome to Stone Cold Stros, episode 24 of season 2. I'm Brandon Strange. I'm joined by Charlie Polillo and Josh Jordan. Of course, you can read Charlie's work weekly on sportsmap.com and follow him on X at Polillo. And you can read Josh's work daily on sportsmap.com and follow him on X at Josh Jordan 975. Just a reminder, the full show is available right now in audio form at your favorite podcast provider. Just search Stone Cold Stros. So, gents, we got our much anticipated rematch between the Astros and Mariners. It did not disappoint. Outside of a weaker outing from Blanco and Martinez out of the pen, Houston's pitching went toe-to-toe with Seattle's arms. Of course, it helps that Seattle's offense just continues to be woeful and now looks worse with Julio Rodriguez's nasty ankle sprain and Ty France getting outrighted following the series. All of a sudden now, Houston's jumping up the power rankings. We were talking before this that CBS has them ranked as high as 5th, which really means absolutely nothing other than perception. And unfortunately for Houston, the competition does get a little stiffer over the next few weeks following this Oakland series. So, Charlie, what were some of your takeaways from the Seattle series, and what are your thoughts on how Houston navigates this stretch of tougher competition coming up?
Well, it's now a 63-game match race, 63 for the Astros. The Mariners have played a couple more games. The Rangers still lurking on the perimeter, avoiding getting swept by the Orioles. So the Rangers starting the week 5 games back. They're clearly still in it at this point, given head-to-head matchup 7 they have with the Mariners. A chance to take the season series with the Astros when they play up in Arlington the first week in August. But look, it's a good weekend for the Astros. It leaves the feeling of, there was some more meat on the bone with the chance to sweep and feel like you've really delivered a sledgehammer shot to the Mariners. If the Astros had swept, it's not like the division race would have been over. They'd have had a 2-game lead. But the Mariners responded. You mentioned Ronel Blanco, right? The antenna are up. Right over his last 6 starts, a 3.90 ERA, which is still playable, but obviously not ace-level stuff that Blanco provided over the first 3 months of the season. But taking 2 out of 3 there, you're now even. All 3 teams in the American League West, the front half of the week, they get cupcakes. So who best devours will move things along toward the weekend, right? The Astros get Oakland, while the Mariners get the Angels, and the Rangers get the White Sox, and the Rangers get an extra game with the White Sox. So they should all tack some wins onto the schedule heading to the weekend when the Astros get the Dodgers at Minute Maid Park for the first time with fans in attendance since the 2017 World Series, for those who'd like to genuflect about that a little bit. So, the Astros right now have all the momentum, having played great baseball for a while now. The Mariners, meanwhile, have been in a coma. So that dovetailed perfectly. The Astros making up a 10-game deficit and then taking a 1-game lead in not quite record time, but close enough to it, so that we have a great race. But that the Astros are inevitable? No, they're not. This next week ahead of the trade deadline, I think, is critical, especially from Seattle's side, trying to fortify their pathetic offense. They have the best starting rotation in the American League. They have a solid bullpen. They have a top-tier closer. Andres Munoz is better than Josh Hader, for instance. But if the Mariners don't add bats, I'm not going to quite say it's the Astros' division to lose. It's not like they would have choked it away if they don't win this division. But, pitching is 90% of baseball's an old adage, extremely overrated adage, right? You rarely can win with a lousy offense. Maybe the Mariners pull it off, but if and when, emphasize on if, the Astros get back Kyle Tucker, the gap in the offenses becomes even more lopsided. And if and when, on Justin Verlander, his return does not make the Astros rotation as good as the Mariners rotation, but a competent Verlander would balance the scales a little bit. And if you're an Astros fan, you should feel comfortable right now about their chances winning the division. But that they're 90% or something like that now? No, they're not.
No, if I'm looking at positives, it's Hunter Brown continuing to look like that top of the rotation guy. Ever since that sinker got mixed in, the results have been fantastic. So that's great to see with, Blanco. He's still been fine, but just, not quite what he was, which we expected. And, the bullpen coming in and giving up home runs that are charged to him doesn't help either. It's good to see, Framber Valdez. The walks are a little bit concerning, but you're still getting the results you want from Framber. So just waiting to get healthy. And as I'm looking at the Mariners, I almost fear the Rangers a little bit more just because we've seen them actually do it. And to Charlie's point, Rangers are only 5 games back right now. And they got 4 against the White Sox and 3 against the Blue Jays. And it makes me look at the Astros and be like, you better take care of business against the A's, because as we mentioned, you got the Dodgers after that. It's a light schedule for the Rangers. And with the not All-Star break, but with the trade deadline being so close, I just don't see a lot of these teams being sellers, the Rangers in particular. So I think that's something to keep an eye on too. I think this is going to be a 3-horse race for quite a bit here as they go down the final stretch.
To the Astros rotation, I mean, not that Hunter Brown needs to throw 6 scoreless innings every time out, but his holding up as new Hunter Brown, 4-seam fastball largely ditched, sinking fastball really turning around his season and career, and in part the Astros' fortunes. But if we were ranking the reliability or expectation level of the Astros starters the rest of the way, I mean, Brown, 11 consecutive starts going 6 innings plus. I would rank him 1. I would rank Framber 2. When he has a bad inning, it's a really bad inning. But overall, Framber's body of work over his last 8-10 starts has been pretty solid. Blanco with the velocity drop in consecutive starts, then extra time off, pushing him back to Sunday, which I thought was sensible coming out of the break. So maybe he just didn't quite have the sharpness there. But I think he bears watching. He did not have a major league workload of any consequence last year relative to Hunter Brown, who, whether Hunter Brown faded or just stunk, at least went through it before. Blanco's never been in a big league rotation season long. So that's a cross your fingers hard. And then it's merely hope for the best as long as Spencer Arrighetti and Jake Bloss are 4 and 5 in the rotation.
I think one of the encouraging things too has been the hitting from Yainer Diaz. We know obviously he scuffled early and seems to have turned it around. Also just really doing a good job of bringing guys in. He has 11 RBI for the month of July, and just has been a guy who has answered the bell for having to back up. I mean, it's probably one of the hardest things to do is, hey, you're going to be protection for Yordan Alvarez. And he's been serviceable in that role. Obviously, you'd much rather have Kyle Tucker in that role. And you hope that when you get Kyle Tucker back, which it looks like every day we're getting a little closer to that since he's actually doing baseball activities now. So hopefully that can be an answer for them offensively to help maybe counterbalance some of these pitching deficiencies or the thinness that they have in their rotation. Yainer Diaz was reportedly taking grounders at first. We know Victor Caratini is on the way back. Charlie, what do you think the likelihood of maybe we start seeing Diaz, probably not regularly, but maybe start seeing some appearances from Diaz at that first base position, considering how good Caratini and Salazar have been this year, and especially with maybe the downtick we've seen recently in Singleton's hitting?
If that's the way it goes, the Astros were short-sighted about it. But last year we heard, well, you don't want to throw Yainer into first base during a playoff race and important games and defense at the position. First base defense isn't just a throwaway. They can stick any big lug out there and expect decent play. Victor Caratini had a couple of game-winning hits earlier this season, but his offensive track record is not particularly strong. He's maybe a 700 OPS guy. Salazar mixed in a couple of nice games, but there's nothing about his pedigree that says, hey, you want him as part of a platoon behind the plate. So to me, I would hope that Diaz is their primary catcher because his offensive value is heightened as a catcher because you get so little production out of the catching spot for so many teams. It's been an interesting season for Yainer. Maybe the expectations were too high coming in. Compared to Martin Maldonado, almost anyone was going to represent a fantastic offensive hope and upgrade. But with the 23 home runs that he hit last season, the idea that, Yainer, he's going to be Johnny Bench and Mike Piazza. He can be 30, 35 home run guy. And then through May, he was flat out awful, a Maldi-esque OPS over about a 6-week period. Then he got it going and jump-started with home runs in 4 consecutive games. And all right, Yainer's power is back. And then it went away, right? Until he lined one that bounced off the top of the fence and into the seats in Seattle for a home run. It had been about a month and a half between home runs for Yainer Diaz, that he has just 8 home runs this season, but is on pace to drive at about 90 runs this season. It's an unusual combination, but while the power has been in dry dock for the most part, the batting average has trended up. He still swings at too many pitches and doesn't walk very much, so the on-base percentage is low relative to his batting average. But Yainer Diaz as a catcher is a major positive offensively, and he has not embarrassed himself whatsoever behind the plate. All that overhyped hullabaloo about Maldi as the wet nurse bringing guys along. There was no discernible gap in the results on the mound last year between Maldonado and Diaz, and the early season struggles of anyone on the Astros staff about the pitchers, not about Yainer Diaz. So I would hope he remains the primary catcher. ... The question is, where are you going to get competent production at first base? I mean, do they grade Caratini as clearly a better backstop than Yainer Diaz? I think that's arguable.
Yeah, at least Caratini behind the plate, you're getting a perfectly serviceable major league catcher that has shown a propensity to get some big hits for you this year. So we'll see how he bounces back from the injury. I just think if Dubon and Singleton were playing a little better at first base, it wouldn't be something we'd be bringing up as much. But Singleton over his last 7 games it's been pretty poor. 208 batting average, 292 slugging. Dubon's had his struggles as well. So maybe it is a platoon situation to where when they want to get a righty in the lineup at first base, they consider Yainer. We've been talking about it forever. But for some reason, they've decided not to do it. I'm sure they had their reasons, but Charlie's right about one thing. You have a big advantage if you have a really good hitter playing catcher for you every day. Not every team has something like that, especially one that's so young as Yainer with so much potential ahead of him. But it also isn't great when you have a nothing at first base offensively. So it's something that, Espada and Dana Brown, they'll have to figure out. They really want to address it. Maybe the trade deadline's an option. We can talk about that later, but I'd like to see Yainer maybe just once a week getting to play first base, something like that. I'd like to see him remain as the primary catcher.
All this speaks to the return of Kyle Tucker would be such a boost, right? That one guy that lengthens your lineup. Tucker's in the cleanup spot, and then Yainer is in the 5 spot. And adding Tucker is taking out an outfielder who's not hitting. I mean, Loperfido's defense has been much better than his offense. He continues to be a whiff machine, and it's really going to hamstring his career if he can't make somewhat better contact than he has to this point. Jake Myers, huge home run Saturday in Seattle aside. Over the last month, has been lousy. Chas McCormick, an RBI single in his second at-bat on Sunday. That aside, he's been woebegone basically the entire season. So if you get Tucker back, an Astros team that's still top 5 in the American League in runs scored just becomes that much more potent and drops down the importance of squeezing every drop of production you can out of first base or behind the plate when Yainer Diaz isn't catching. Jeremy Pena is hitting 8th instead of 6th. So Kyle Tucker and that worst bone bruise we've ever heard about or seen, it's approaching 2 months on Kyle Tucker, and he's still not running? I wonder if we'll hear, oh, yeah, we chose not to disclose it, but the actual injury turned out to be because for a bone bruise, this is an extraordinarily long absence.
It has been. Another guy that I want to bring up too is just Jeremy Pena, because we saw him scuffle during that month of June when seemingly everybody else was doing great, but he's put it together. Talk about how important his play is being, because he obviously gives you great defense at the position, but being able to rely on him and him to be not be a total nothing and be susceptible to the sliders. We still see him struggle with those, but my goodness. Craig Biggio struggled with the slider outside his entire career, and he's in the Hall of Fame. I don't think that's the trajectory of Jeremy Pena, but it's been nice to see him be able to bounce back and have really nice, competent at-bats.
When Jeremy Pena is hitting 8th or 9th, his offensive production is all right. Look, he's a middle-of-the-pack offensive player. He was as a mediocre offensive player. He was as a rookie. He really made no strides forward last year, and overall, he's made no strides this year. So he turns 27 in September. We're getting to the point that this looks to be who Jeremy Pena is. He had a 3-week out-of-body experience that secures his legacy in Houston forever with the postseason heroics in 2022. but that was a decent offensive player having a tremendous run, right? Adolis Garcia is not Hank Aaron. Against the Astros in the ALCS last year, he was Hank Aaron and then some, right? It happens in the short run. Pena is a middle-of-the-pack shortstop. He would not be the starter for roughly half the teams in the American League, half the teams in Major League Baseball, but average has value. It's better than stinking. And so Pena, he gives you at least average, and he's batting 8th or 9th along with whoever is in center field. When you have the full varsity doing the heavy lifting, right, the guys who are supposed to be the anchors, the fulcrums of your offense doing their work. But when Pena is being asked to hit 5th or 6th, and he's really not that caliber of an offensive player, if he's not performing, it's more glaring than if he's struggling some in the 8-9 spot. If you have Altuve and Bregman and Jordan and Tucker and Diaz 1 through 5 doing their work.
We talked about it last week, and Pena's on base percentage is higher than Alex Bregman's. That's still a thing. So to me, that's improvement. He's getting on base a little more, and that's why we like Bregman up at the top of the lineup, because he works walks and he gets on base for Jordan. And we haven't even mentioned it. The cycle from Jordan, that was unbelievable over the weekend. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. The thing that really leaps out with me with Jeremy is how good he is at getting an infield hit. How many times do you see an inning basically being over, but Jeremy finds a way to beat the throw out at first base, keep the inning alive, maybe allow a guy to score from third base, that kind of thing. So the power's not quite where we wanted it to be with Pena. We thought it'd be more, especially playing at Minute Maid Park and how strong that dude is. But, he's sitting at 8 home runs and it's almost August. So it doesn't look like that's what he's going to turn into. But the speed is helping you out a lot. That's made a big difference. So, hey, it's nice to have some young guys on the team that can run a little bit. I like an athletic ball club. Jeremy's one of those guys that gives you that. And hopefully when Kyle Tucker gets back, his speed will also play, because, he was a guy that we talk about, 30 steals. Is Tucker going to have that kind of explosiveness to be able to steal bases and make big plays in the outfield coming back from that leg injury that is clearly much worse than we all thought when it happened?
Yeah, that Pena's on base is higher than Bregman's is more an indictment of the season that Bregman's having than a leap that Pena has made. Jeremy Pena still lacks plate discipline. He very rarely walks. You look at his strikeout to walk ratio, it's bad. Bregman's walking less this year by a notable percentage that he has in past seasons. And whether it was just when Alex Bregman was a lost soul at the plate through the first 2 months of the season, the hot stretch that he had aside, before and after, are pitchers more apt to go after him because they're less fearful of Alex Bregman. I think he's tried to be a little more aggressive earlier in the counts sometimes. But Bregman's on-base percentage is well down from we're accustomed to being. And that's because Alex Bregman overall this season has just been a very middle-of-the-pack player and not what you would hope to be getting out of the two-hole offensively. He just happens to be the best fit in their lineup presently. And you're hoping Alex Bregman, end of 162 games, reverts closer to his career norm. Remember, Alex Bregman hasn't hit over 270 in 4 years now, and he's at 255 this season. So if your walk percentage is down by 15, 20%, and your batting average is in the 250s, you're just not going to have any lead on base percentage.
You bring up something that I think has been kind of an ongoing narrative this season, which is we're not seeing guys walk. I mean, so many aggressive at bats where they're swinging at the first pitch, outside of, Jordan, who's, gonna see the fours get thrown up on him a lot just because of the amount of power he has and the absolute fear that he strikes. And most teams, no greater than, I think, Seattle, who has PTSD about what that man has done to them over the past couple of seasons. Are you at all concerned that when you're facing these elite pitchers, when you're these elite arms that these guys are going up against, that you kind of let them off the hook, giving them 5 to 7 pitch innings because like everybody's swinging at the first pitch? I mean, obviously Jose Altuve is notorious for that. He's a very special case though, because he's a great hitter. And so you kind of just understand that's part and parcel with who Jose Altuve is as a hitter behind the plate. But is it a little concerned? They seem to have gone from the team that was, relentless behind the plate, like really making guys forcing them to throw them strikes, getting them deep into counts, and really, making pitchers work versus what we see now, which is really, really short innings in which if the guys aren't making contact early, they're not working those really extended at-bats.
The very best Astros offenses were like torture chambers for opposing starting pitchers, where they're going 90, 100 pitches to get through 5 innings. And the sooner you can get into the middle relief and go to town on guys who aren't good enough to be starters or good enough to be back end of the bullpen guys, you can really hammer away at that point. Some of it's just the nature of current Astros hitters. I mean, Maldonado was an atrocity offensively, but he had a couple of years where he actually drew a decent number of walks for the rotten eggs that he sucked overall. Yainer Diaz hardly ever walks. Myers and McCormick very rarely walk. Jeremy Pena very rarely walks. Alex Bregman's walk numbers down this season. Jose Altuve, I mean, he was never a guy who was going to be confused with Ricky Henderson in drawing walks, but his walk percentage has trended up in recent years. Well, this year it's trending back down some. And when Altuve's going great, swinging everything. But, over the last 10 games, he's not going great, and he's getting himself out on first pitches more than you'd like to see. He's on pace to walk about 40 times per season. That's not very good for a leadoff hitter. Now, batting 300 with power compensates for that, but Altuve's OPS is down 100 points from where it was each of the last 2 years. On-base percentage is one of the two components of OPS, right? He's not quite slugging at the same rate he did the last 2 years. The on-base percentage is definitely down. It nets out. Altuve's still a tremendous player, but compared to his own standard, Altuve's down from where he was the last couple of years. Hey, Kyle Tucker, as he was a top 3 MVP guy before the injury, Kyle Tucker was walking like he'd never walked before in his career. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, maybe here, the single best predictive statistic toward how many runs a team is going to score is on-base percentage. Way better than batting average, better than slugging percentage, on-base percentage. And the Astros collectively aren't quite as good as that at that as a team as we've seen with some of their elite offenses.
I wonder if a lot of their how often they swing at first pitch is their aggressive approach. I wonder if it has something to do with how much they've been in the playoffs the last 7 straight years. We know all about that, but when you're facing top-notch playoff pitchers that have nasty stuff, it makes sense that maybe you don't want to work a deep count where you're likely to swing at a splitter in the dirt or a slider outside. If you get a hittable fastball, go ahead and take your chances with that and see if you can make that work. But maybe that's not the approach for a long regular season where not every pitcher is one of the top pitchers in the league that you're facing. Not everybody throws 99 with wicked breaking stuff. Maybe it's just a more cautious approach where, take some pitches, see some pitches, work the count. What happens to the Astros all the time, give the pitcher a chance to walk you on a 3-2 count if it's not close. You just don't see that very often. So pitchers aren't as likely to make mistakes because, the at-bat's over after 3 or 4 pitches. So I just wonder if maybe an approach more focused on the regular season, not a postseason approach, would help these guys. And even Dana Brown's talked about that this team gets too pool happy. That when pitchers are there on the outside part of the plate, they're not quite as willing to just go with the pitch, take the base hit, pass the baton to the next guy. I think that's when the Astros get in a funk. That's the stuff they're not doing. That they're trying to pull sliders low and outside to the left side of the field if you're a right-handed hitter. And that's when Pena starts to go well because he sees so many of those outside breaking pitches. When he goes with them to the opposite field, that's when it seems like he's at his best.
Ditto Bregman to that point that you make, Josh. And again, to iterate, you don't have to say reiterate. Iterate means the same thing. The standard here is the Astros measuring against the Astros standard, right? They're a top 5 offense in the American League. I mean, they led Major League Baseball in batting average for most of the last couple of months, but they haven't led in on-base percentage. They haven't led in OPS because of the on-base percentage and missing Tucker's thump in there as well. But for the Astros offense to be the very best version of what this Astros offense can be, drawing a few more walks absolutely would help the cause.
And if it sounds like we're being negative, we're really not. It's just we're trying to be realistic into where they're at right now and what they're going to have to do because, look, we're all very grateful that they've been able to quickly crawl out of the position they were in and be in contention for the division, which is great. But as we said, there's some stiff competition coming up. You have a couple series with the Red Sox. In this month, you've got the Rays, who are always pesky to play against. You mentioned the Dodgers. So you've got some
Paul Skeens probably Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you've got some real stiff, some stiffer competition that's ahead of you. This is not over yet. They have their work cut out for them. I will, for the people who are the naysayers or who criticize, Charlie, you take some bullets on the comment section sometimes because you're very realistic and pragmatic about the situation, and not through the same maybe orange colored lenses that maybe myself or Josh would see things through. You were the one that was championing the fact that the Astros were not out of it, that there was plenty of time for them based on the schedule to get back into it. So again, I'd say, like, for all of the criticisms that maybe we've taken and saying like, oh, maybe, we've been a little bit more critical of them than maybe is needed. I think it's just about being pragmatic and really looking at it realistically. I mean, for the purposes of just this channel, let's take away fandom out of it. Just the fact that the better they do, the more, viewership, people are consuming more content from us. So it's in all three of our best interest that the team does well, but we can't ignore what we're seeing in front of us. And again, one of the things I see is that lack of walking. And Josh, you bring up a great point, which is guys hitting the other way. It's something that, for as great of a hitter as Yordan Alvarez is, he still really hasn't learned to use the other part of the field. He hasn't had to, because he's such a great hitter that if he can get a hold of something that's straight away or more in, then he can handle that. But you're exactly right. We don't see a lot of the guys other than the Bregmans. Chas McCormick's better away. But you don't really see those guys really take advantage of all parts of the field. And Dubon's a guy who, when he's better, is not trying to pull the ball as much. He's trying to, do with the ball what he's capable of, which is, letting it ride in and taking a liner away if you can get it. So any final words for this video, Charlie?
On the life in the big city, no one has 100% customer satisfaction, but this isn't a cheerleading channel, right? We do it for hardcore Astros fans or baseball fans who want interesting dialogue and back and forth and tilt the prism and get different ideas and viewpoints. If you want pom-poms, get yourself a binky and have a good time. And that's fine too, but that's not how we're going to cater this program to. If your child misbehaves and you need to discipline the child, it doesn't mean you don't love your child. You're just doing your job as a parent. So we're parenting the Astros along because we all get tremendous jollies out of having in-town baseball to cover all the way into November.
Yep.
And just one quick thing on Yainer Diaz that came to me after the fact. I don't mean for late this season as a, wow, he's here already. But if you have no quality first baseman in your minor league system, and the Astros don't have a meaningful prospect, and Yainer is athletic, and we've talked before, he runs really well for a big guy. Not like Craig Biggio, but Craig Biggio, get him out from behind the plate to really keep those legs fresh and maximize his value as an all-around player. The Astros just drafted a catcher in the first round in Walker Yannick, who's a college guy. So if he's the real deal, it should not take him 3 years to get to the major leagues. So maybe by 2026, Yainer can be the Astros' primary first baseman because Walker Yannick is already here. Go Bearcats, as the Astros lead catcher. But for 2024, to suddenly say, hey, Yainer, go out there, play first base and do your best, that wasn't real great preparation for this point in the season, just as earlier in the year, Joey Loperfido playing mostly outfield in the minor leagues was silly.
All right. Well, that's it for episode one this part one, I should say, of this episode of Stone Cold Stros. We'll have another video drop tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. And as always, go Stros.